Welcome to this ultimate beginner's guide to using AI for writing your fiction, nonfiction, or whatever it is you need to write. My name is Jason Hamilton. I'm the nerdy novelist, and I have been writing books for years now. And for the last 3 years or so, I've been working at Kindlepreneur, one of the largest websites about writing books and self-publishing them. So I have a good idea of the publishing process. And then ever since AI came into the story, I've been diving headlong into that, and now as of this recording, this is the largest channel about AI specifically for fiction authors. So this video, I'm going to take you from start to finish, my process on how to write a book with AI, but we're going to go kind of high level here. If you are new to this channel, this is the perfect place to start. If you are not new, then I would still watch this video anyway, because we're going to be going into a really good overview of just everything you need to know. And I know a lot of people kind of forget about a few things. There's a lot that we need to cover, so we'll be doing that in this video. First, let's start off by answering what is AI. AI is, in this context, what we call generative AI. Generative is the key word there, where it means that we are looking at a tool that is essentially auto-predicting what the next word should be based on the prompt that you give it. With AI, you give it a prompt, it gives you an output. And the process of getting to the results you want and getting the best results you want is the process that we call prompt engineering. In the world of book writing, our main goal is to be able to write a book using AI. Whether that means writing the entire book with AI is another matter entirely. And at the end of this video, I will actually be answering the question, should you even write an entire book with AI? So stick around to the end for that. But the reality is that people use AI in very different ways, because the writing process is a very long process, right? It is a multi-step process. It isn't just like you sit down, you write words, and you're done. It's a process that involves brainstorming ideas, assembling all of your pieces together, creating outlines, creating characters, assembling sources if you're writing nonfiction, doing world building, crafting your setting. All of these things are all different pieces of the process. And in my experience, I found that most of the authors who are using AI usually zero in on a few of these, but not all of these processes. For instance, I really enjoy outlining, and so I do most of the outlining myself, but I don't really like the actual text writing part of the first draft. So getting that first draft down is always difficult for me, so I turn to AI to help me with that first draft, and then I flesh it out from there. For other people, they love writing the first draft, and so they do that all themselves, but coming up with the ideas, figuring out what happens is a little bit more work. And so basically, I just recommend that people find an area where AI can help you, because it can help at every stage of the process, and let it do that for you or help you do that step. And then you take it from there on the steps that you really appreciate. In fact, one of the most common misconceptions about AI is that all it is you push a button and it does all the work for you, and that's it, when that is not the case. I like to think of AI as a productivity partner. It is an assistant to help you do things a little bit faster, but contrary to popular belief, it doesn't take the humanity out of things. You are still the human author. You still do everything. It's just able to lend a hand in certain areas in much the same way as an assistant might do, leaving you with more time to focus on the more important bits, usually the more creative and imaginative bits of the writing process. But all this does beg the question. I get this question a lot from a lot of different people, and it was a question that I had early on. Am I going to get in trouble for using AI? Is Amazon going to ban me? Is Google going to unlist my article? All kinds of things. Am I going to get booted from this platform or another? And the answer is no. All of these major tech companies, whether it's Google or Amazon, all of them are investing heavily in AI because they know that that is the future. And while some of these platforms are requiring you to disclose if you use AI in certain ways, that is usually only for the cases where the entire book or large portions of the book were generated with AI, even with a hefty amount of revision. They will often require you to disclose this. Amazon currently requires you to disclose this, but it does nothing. They don't label it, at least for now. There may be some laws in the future that require them to label it. And so if that happens, well, that's the government's fault for enacting those laws. But Amazon is taking the steps to have that information so they could display that information if possible. But so far, they are not labeling any AI generated books. They are not penalizing authors for uploading any AI generated books. Amazon is very pro AI. And so you do not have to worry about anything happening there. What you do need to worry about, however, is the quality of your book. You are still responsible for the quality of your book. If you just spit out books left and right using AI, but don't do the work of actually validating everything to make sure it's good, to make sure it lines up with your vision, and that you even have a vision, you need a vision, all of that will lead to a poor quality book, and you don't want that. The more poor quality books that you have, the bigger the chance that Amazon might actually take preventative action against you. But that is due to low quality content, not due to the fact that you used AI to create it. Again, this is a productivity tool. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between models and AI writing tools, because they are not the same thing. A model is a specific large language model, or LLM, which is usually trained on a massive amount of data, usually written data in this case, and they are usually created by these big companies like OpenAI or Anthropic or Google, and these are the heavy hitters. These are what most people are talking about when they talk about AI. An AI writing tool, however, is different. An AI writing tool utilizes a model but formats it in a specific way that might be specific to a certain audience. For instance, later in this video, I will give you a couple of different AI writing tools that I have used that are specific to fiction authors. But those tools are not new models. Those tools are using the existing models out there in order to generate words. And there are different pros and cons of each different model. The most famous models are the ones that you will find in ChatGPT. For instance, let's look here. When you are in ChatGPT, you will notice that there are actually two different models that you can look at. If you come up here to this little drop down, you have the option for GPT 3.5 and GPT-4. These are two separate models. The GPT-4 is more advanced than the GPT 3.5, but the 3.5 does have some advantages, like it's quite faster and can do some tasks a little bit better, if we're being honest, such as summarization. But most of the time you would want to use the more advanced one like GPT-4. However, there are other models as well. For instance, if we look at Claude Pro here, over here on the side, you can see there are three different models that you can select within the Claude Pro platform. The most recent is Claude 2.1, but there's also Claude 2.0 and Claude Instant, which was before 2.0. Right now, as of this recording, Claude 2.0 is the best one for creative writing because it is very creative. Claude 2.1, while it is more advanced in some areas, the methods that they took to become more advanced in those areas and to be more accurate and so on has actually made it worse as a creative writing partner. So Claude 2.0 is the best one to go with here. However, there are a lot more models. What we have here is a tool called OpenRouter.ai. This is one example of just a third-party tool that allows you to access pretty much all of the important models out there. So we can select this to select our model, and then here is a giant list of all of the different models that they have available. For instance, here are all the Claude models, and yes, there are more than 3 Claude models here because there are actually more than 3. In Claude Pro, they only showed 3 because those were the 3 prominent ones. But here we have version 2.1, version 2.0, Claude Instant, and then a few even older models there. Additionally, you can see all of the different OpenAI models. So here you have various versions of GPT 3.5 because there are minor improvements to these and differences. We have various versions of GPT-4, same reason. But you'll notice there are others here as well. For instance, we have Mistral 7B Instruct. We have Hugging Face Zephyr 7B, OpenChat, Mythomist, Cinema Dolphin. Mistral. We've got all kinds of different things here. And most of these extra models, besides the ones created by OpenAI and Anthropic, these are most of them open source models. And while these models tend to not be as advanced as the ones coming out of OpenAI or Anthropic, they do have two major advantages. And one of those is that it is much cheaper to run. Because when you're using a service like OpenRouter, like we're using here, it costs a certain amount of money for every word that you generate. And for the open source models, that number is very, very small compared to the larger, beefier models. The other major advantage that they give you is that they are uncensored, which means you can write not safe for work content, you can write excessive violence or whatever it is you need to write, and it won't run into any problems with you. A lot of people use Claude for their creative writing because the natural sounding language is really, really good. But there's some issues with Claude, and probably the biggest one that most people run into is the fact that it doesn't like to write even remotely not safe for work content. I know a lot of people who write cozy mysteries, and even the cozy mystery, if there's a mention of like a murder or anything like that for the mystery to solve, it won't like to write stuff like that. And so having the ability to switch seamlessly between these different models is a useful skill to have. So which of these models should you use? Well, the reality is you should use whichever model is necessary for the task that you are trying to do. As I mentioned, Claude 2.0 seems to be right now the best model for natural sounding language, but the GPT-4 models tend to be more accurate, even though the natural sounding language is not so good in the GPT-4 models. And then, of course, if you want to write not safe for work content or anything like that, you should go to the open source models. And additionally, you can work with the open source models if you want to save a lot of money, depending on how you are using these models. But what about some AI writing tools? I'm going to speak mostly to fiction writing tools because actually I believe for nonfiction it's a slightly different situation because it depends on what kind of nonfiction you're writing and all of that. But with fiction writing, it's pretty simple which tools are the best ones to look at. The first one that I have here is called Sudowrite. Sudowrite is probably the most user-friendly of all of these different options. It's great for beginners, but it has some limitations in terms of what it can do. But what Sudowrite allows you to do is it allows you to come here and put in a brain dump of things you want to know about your story. And from there, you can add information about the genre and about the style of your generation that you want to create. And then you can generate from all of that information, you can generate a synopsis, you can generate characters, you can generate an outline, and from that outline, you can start to actually generate the prose of the chapters. And yes, Sudowrite allows you to do it in one click per chapter. However, usually it doesn't end up very good unless you heavily guide it along the way. Additionally, you can take text here within Sudowrite and do various things to it, like ask it to describe it in more detail. So using the different senses, you can ask it to rewrite it by expanding it, shortening it, making it show more than tell, etc. And then one of the nice things about Sudowrite is that you have these list of plugins, which are community created prompting engines. Essentially, they allow communities to create specific prompts that you can then take that same prompt and use it in different ways within Sudowrite. So that's a very useful thing about Sudowrite. The second, and possibly my favorite at the moment, these things change all the time with AI, but it's a service called Novel Crafter. Novel Crafter is a little bit cheaper than Sudowrite, but what you do is with Novel Crafter, you have to hook it up to OpenRouter. So with OpenRouter, you have access to use all of these different models here, but it does cost a certain amount per generation. Now, thankfully, the amount of cost that you usually generate, even if you're writing a full book, is like a full book might cost you a couple of dollars. It's really not a whole lot. And so you actually save a lot by going with Novel Crafter unless you're generating massive, massive amounts of words. Which, by the way, in Sudowrite, the amount of words you get is a fixed amount. And then you can run out of words in the month and you have to like top up. Whereas with Novel Crafter, you can just write as much as you want. because you're hooked up to Open Router, it just means that it's pay as you go, right? So that's something to keep in mind. The third option is called Future Fiction Academy, and they have this thing called Rexy within Future Fiction Academy. It is a lot more expensive than the other two options, but they are kind of billing themselves as the Adobe Photoshop of AI fiction writing. It is really advanced. You can get really, really good output using the Rexy. Plus, when you pay the monthly fee, you also get access to all of their training data, which is an extensive, like it started out as a training platform, not as a AI writing platform. And so really that's what you're paying for. And then Rexy is just an add-on to the training platform where you'll learn lots of cool things about AI. And it's really in depth. It's really for those people who are very serious about writing with AI. And I will do a video in the future talking about which AI fiction tool I believe is best for most people. Obviously, there is no one best option because it depends on who you are and what your needs are, but I do have a favorite. The other options for creating your books is to use ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude Pro directly. This is for both of them. It's a flat $20 rate for each one. And it uses a chat interface like this, which seems to be the most useful interface to interact with an AI for most people. The reason I recommend a tool like Sudowrite or Novelcrafter or Rexy is because those are geared specifically for fiction authors. So it makes the process a little bit better, a little bit more seamless for fiction. However, usually, even if you are using one of those three tools, I still recommend either having ChatGPT or Claude because it is good to have that sort of extra chat interface to bounce ideas off of. It gives you a lot more flexibility in what you can do. And my current favorite right now is Claude Pro. However, ChatGPT does have a few advantages, probably the biggest of which is access to DALL-E 3, which is the image generator found inside of ChatGPT. But as a general rule of thumb, anything you find in ChatGPT tends to be more accurate to what your prompt is, but not as good a quality of prose. It requires a lot more revision on the back end. By contrast, Claude tends to be more creative. It tends to give you better creative ideas and creative output, as well as better prose overall. But it is harder to get it to actually follow your prompt. You have to really wrangle it to get there. And as I've mentioned, the newer model, Claude 2.1, is not really as usable for fiction authors. And so really, I only recommend using Claude 2.0. Now, there are a lot of other tools that I haven't covered, but I really feel like for most authors, you will get by using just one of these fiction tools and one of either ChatGPT or Claude. If you're writing nonfiction, I think you could probably get by with just Claude or ChatGPT. Either one would do what you need it to do. And if you wanted to access some of the other models on a case-by-case basis, then I would look at Open Router as a way to having a chat interface with any of the models that you need. And we haven't even talked about other AI tools that are very useful for authors, such as AI art tools. There's DALL-E 3, which you can get in ChatGPT, but there's also Midjourney, there's Stable Diffusion, there's all kinds of things there. We're not going to get deep into it in this episode, but I do think that DALL-E 3 and Midjourney are the two best AI art models out there to use, which can be useful in a lot of different use cases. So how do you actually go about creating a book and using any of these tools? The process is slightly different depending on which model you're using and which tool you're using. So if you're using Novelcrafter, it works a lot different than in Sudowrite. And if you're using ChatGPT, you might do it different than you would in Claude. But the general process, and I'm speaking very generally here, and I'll have more videos going in depth on each platform, is to start small and work your way up. There is a novel creating technique that existed long before AI called the snowflake technique, and it's very similar to that. In my platform and my membership and everything, I call it the fractal technique. So it's the process of starting with a small idea and then expanding that into a synopsis, and then you expand that into an outline, and then you expand each part of the outline into a fully fleshed out list of what we call chapter beats, and then you can take each of those chapter beats and develop it into a full chapter. And by the way, you don't have to use AI for every one of these steps. You can interject your own thoughts on any one of these, like I do with outlining. I do the outlining myself. I do the story beats myself. And then I use the AI to help write out the prose. Which leads me to the final question. Could you, or even should you, be using AI to write your books? And the answer, I think, if you can't guess, is of course, yes. But as I've mentioned before, you have to be cognizant of the quality of your book. Just because we have AI is not an excuse to pump out meaningless books, right? We want them to be good books, and AI is not quite to the point yet where it can write these books all on its own with a push of a button. And I have found that it doesn't actually save me that much time even. And so you might wonder, well, why would you use AI if it's not saving you time? And the reason is, when I was a few years ago, and the reason is that time is not the only thing that AI can help you with. For example, in my own life, a few years ago, I went through a very severe period of burnout. I just found it very difficult to write. I would literally shake over the keyboard because I couldn't get myself to do it and to keep going. AI solved that problem. It made the barrier to entry so much better. It made that blank page syndrome so much easier to bear, and just helps me get back into the things again. And I know without a doubt that I can just get up, start writing right now if I wanted to, because the AI really helps with that writer's block or whatever mental issues that you might be going through. That, I believe, is the real magic of what AI can do for you. And so if you want to learn more about this, I do have a membership with a lot more information and a community around it with lots of people, got hundreds of people in there. Currently, as of the time this video goes out, it is currently closed down for enrollment, but you can sign up for the wait list, which you can do in the link down below. And if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and a thumbs up and all the things that you know that the algorithm likes, and I'll see you in the next video.